Yeah, so I just did this speech at Bloomberg, and I was allowed 15 minutes, and I've been told 7. So you're going to get the snapshot of what we need to do. And ultimately, we need to talk about tires. And before we start, raise your hand. Who cares about tires? Well, that's better than Bloomberg. Tires are really important. They're not just black, round, and have a hole in the middle. They're literally the foundation of everyone on this planet. Whether we drive or get stuff driven to us, it all comes on tires. And we're never going to live on this planet without these products. So there's no future where we elevate ourselves off this planet, and we need to roll. So tires are a critical component to our economy, to everything that we need to be successful on this planet. But the problem is this: tires are really carbon intensive. They are made from fossil fuels and other carbon-intensive raw materials, including basically melting sand at over 1,000 degrees with fossil fuels to basically create something called silica. And ultimately, tires and fossil fuels are intertwined almost in a love fest. And this is really a fundamental problem as we are switching, of course, to EVs in the future, is that even if we had only EVs on our roads today, we'd still be pumping out the oil out of the ground to make the tires for them. So that's problem number 1. Problem number 2, tires are really carbon intensive also in terms of production. So most of these factories that make them are kind of old and polluting, and they run on fossil fuels to make these products. And it's not actually the nicest environments to work in most of the case. Tires are also really inefficient, particularly in the United States, which I won't bore you with, but it's truly atrocious. And this means effectively that every time you are running your vehicle, you're actually paying more in fuel or electricity than you have to, because the state of the art of the technology of the stuff you actually buy isn't up to the scratch of where the technology actually is. And this, of course, increases costs and carbon at the same time as well. And tires wear down. Tires are really, 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 really polluting when it comes to tire wear. We are generating 6 million tons of tire pollution every single year on this planet. And that is ginormous when you consider that most of this happens in cities where we all live and breathe, because that's where vehicles have starts, stops, and turns. And so where most people now live in cities, in urban environments than elsewhere, most tire pollution happens in cities, and that's a big problem because tires are here to stay, and this pollution isn't going away. So tires are also a microplastic. It doesn't get much better, guys. Here's one of ours, but I'll come to that later. Thank you. Tires are a microplastic, so as they wear down, it's the largest source of primary microplastic pollution practically in the oceans. It's the largest source from the Western world, and not only is it harmful to the aquatic environment, it's just here to stay. We aggregate these things, and although I can't show a picture of a microplastic, this is another idea of trying to get rid of tires. So we thought we could make reefs out of them, but they're too toxic for the reefs animals to live on them. And when the hurricanes come through, they roll on the seafloor and destroy all the coral. So that's great too. Tires cause air pollution. We are breathing more tire dust than tailpipe dust in the UK right now. So when you leave this building and take a breath, yeah, it's more tires than tailpipes. That's already with all the dirty diesel still in our streets. And that is a major problem because you're now breathing microplastics. Great. Who are toxic. I know, it doesn't get much better, does it? Ultimately, tires are so inherently toxic that the California EPA has identified that it's the second most toxic substance they've ever tested in the world on aquatic species such as the coho salmon, which is literally annihilated every time it rains, because the rain falls on the streets, gets washed in the estuaries, and literally murders all of them. And until recently, nobody knew what the reason for that was. But now it's been found only 4 years ago it's caused by tires, particularly raw material called 6-PPD, which we're looking to eliminate. So tires are really complicated. And then, of course, they have an end of life, actually end of their short life. And this means, of course, then when you're running a tire, the whole industry wants to sell you more tires, so they don't have a huge incentive to make them last too long. We consume 2.3 billion tires every year on this planet. And most of them end up in fields, some of them are burnt in cement kilns and power stations, some of them just catch fire, and that is also a horrendous way to increase carbon emissions as well, because most tires at the end of the life are simply converted into carbon. So the life cycle of a tire is carbon, 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 microplastics, air pollution, toxicity, carbon, and waste. So this is a problem. So I guess we should really talk about tires. But we should also talk about electric vehicles. So electric vehicles are fantastic because they help us combat climate change. We're not going to survive on this planet without adopting electric vehicles. Let's be fair about that. Electric vehicles are brilliant. They lower our carbon emissions in total, and they don't have tailpipes, which is great. But they still run on 4 tires that wear down. Look at the positive. An electric vehicle is 3 times more efficient than a normal car. Overall, it's about 90% efficient in converting energy to motion. Now, that means that for every dollar you put in a car, 90 cents turns the wheel. That's great. When you have a fossil fuel car, it's about 30% efficient, actually 25, but let's make it 30 to round up the number. So that means effectively that every dollar is only 30 cents go to turn the wheel. The rest is just lost in energy losses. That's why fossil fuels are crap. But the problem is this. If you put a bad tire on an EV, when you come to replace it, you lose 3 times more range because of that energy conversion delta. On the upside, if we put a great tire on the EV, you get 3 times more bang for the buck. And so Enso is really focused on making EVs more successful by making them more energy efficient on the tire level. But here's a little bit of a problem. Tires also for EVs wear down. That's because EVs are heavy and they have high torque. And they're also mostly driven in cities where most tire pollution is actually generated and where we all live. And so the problem right now is that there's no incentive for the industry to move forward and make better tires for EVs that are less polluting because they want to sell you more tires. And most of the vehicles are fossil fuel vehicles, not EVs. So ultimately, how do we address this? And that's why we set up Enso. We have the mission to make EVs more successful by on one hand making them more energy efficient, extending the range of those vehicles, reduces the energy consumption per mile, the cost per mile, and the carbon per mile as well. We also make them last longer. We do this with material science, the design of the product, and how we capture data from our end customers. For example, London cabbies and delivery vehicles that we're already equipping here in London. And we use that data to improve the product on a continuous basis. Now that effectively means that we can constantly improve every mile and give our customers a bigger benefit because our customers save money, a lot of money. When we're saving over 10% on their energy bill, the delta in costs can pay for the tires themselves. But the tires are also more energy efficient on the overall gain, and that means less charging. That means a wider operational window for a delivery company like Amazon. It means more money in the pocket of the cab driver running on Ensos. They're literally making more money per day. And then, of course, by making the tire last longer, they have to buy fewer tires. And of course, ultimately, we want to make tires carbon neutral entirely. And that's when we look at the raw materials and how we make them. And that's, of course, what we recently announced in the United States. So we're building the world's first carbon neutral tire factory. This is a technology campus that will lead the tire industry. And we already have major partners within this industry who want to see this thing built as fast as possible, because ultimately we want to make EVs more successful at pace. This creates high-skilled jobs, it creates a wonderful supply chain for the US market, and ultimately it will be entirely run on carbon neutral energy. We're working with some great partners who are delivering this for us, and I'm really happy to be here to talk about it. But ultimately, technology exists to address this. We can make tires more efficient. We can make them last longer to reduce the air and microplastic pollution. We can make them non-toxic. We are creating a wholly circular business model for tires, which takes the tire back at the end of life and recycles them back into raw materials by harvesting those critical raw materials. And that's really the Enso story. Enso means circle in Japanese. We were founded on the principle of the circular economy. We're here to make tires sexy again. So if I ask you one thing, keep talking about tires and their impact. We won't make it last forever, but we can make them a lot better, inert to the planet, and ultimately create the ecosystem that our planet needs to run on. Thank you so much.